everyone, and welcome to the question and answer session with my Beautiful Stutter director, Ryan Gielen. As mentioned, I'm Bridget Chapman, and I'm a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Speech and Hearing Science here at OSU and director of the Flaum Center for Fluency Disorders here at the OSU Speech Language Hearing Clinic on campus. We provide evaluations, treatment, education, and outreach services for people who stutter of all ages here on campus and throughout Central Ohio through the generosity of fellow Buckeye business leader and author, Mr. Sander Flaum, who so generously sponsored this event today. It really is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all here. This event was initially scheduled last year as part of Columbus documentary series at the Gateway Film Center, but after a very long year, we were able to put together this virtual screening and discussion. So we will be taking live questions throughout. Please utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And also to view captioning, click on live transcript on your screen and you'll be able to see that. So to get us started, Ryan, welcome to Buckeye Land. We're so pleased to have you here with us. And we would all love to know a little bit about you and a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm a filmmaker in Los Angeles, originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I hope you all will forgive me. I grew up a Michigan fan, but I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored that you would have me and that you would take time to watch the film. And I love talking about it. I think you'll get a sense of that during the Q&A. Bridget, I hope you'll just wave if I'm going on too long, but I love talking about the film and I'm honored to be here.
Well, we're just delighted. To kick off, we'll start with some questions that were pre-submitted and then we'll take some live ones as they roll in. Ryan, one question came in, what is your connection to stuttering?
Yeah, so I actually grew up, I'm not a person who stutters. I grew up for 35 years believing that I had never met anyone who stuttered. And I think that's pretty common for reasons that might be obvious to people training to be SLPs or people who stutter. They're the two biggest factors being, when you are a person who stutters, one thing you can train yourself to do is to hide that stutter or to hide yourself in the back of the classroom, for instance. And the second factor, I'm sure the biggest factor being I and others actively or passively made it very difficult to be someone with a disfluency or to be someone who stuttered specifically, because we were, and many of us remain, ignorant to what it means psychosocially to be a young person who stutters. So, I mentioned my age when I started making this film. I was 35. I was of the age that those early Adam Sandler movies were really, really popular with me and my friend groups. And there's a famous scene in Billy Madison where he has to go back to and repeat every grade and pass every grade in order to get his inheritance, right? Some silly Adam Sandler premise, right? He's going back, he's in 4th or 5th grade. It's early in the film. It's Adam Sandler as a grown man in the back of the classroom, and a boy in the front of the classroom is reading to the class, and he's stuttering badly. He's stuck, and he's in a block. There's some repetition, and Adam Sandler's character leans forward and goes, "Today, Junior." And in the scene, the classroom erupts in laughter. And if you saw it in a theater like I did, the theater erupts in laughter. That toxic moment not only existed in the movie and in the theater, but myself, my friends, every person my age that I ever met for the next 20 years understood that reference and had used that reference and continued to use that reference for years and years and years. The toxicity of that, not only using it when someone trips over their words, but when someone actually stutters and us thinking that it's somehow funny, is so pervasive and so problematic. So I lived 35 years like that. And then my producer on this film, Michael Alden, produced a King's Speech on Broadway and on the West End, took me to the Say Gala in 2014, I think, and said, "Hey, I have met this organization, Say, there might be a film in some of the work that they do, come with me." So I went, and the way that the Say Gala opens, you got a sense of it in the film, but there's 500 people dressed to the nines in this gorgeous auditorium. The lights go down, a single spotlight on stage, and this 8-year-old boy walks out. He's got his little gray suit, his little tie, clutching a piece of paper, walks to center stage in the spotlight all by himself and says, "Welcome to the Say Gala." but it takes him 15 or 20 seconds to say it. He stops, dead silence. You can hear a pin drop, beat, beat, and then the entire auditorium, standing ovation, huge applause. You could see this boy grow a foot in that moment. His entire being changed. This is not an overstatement. The trajectory of his life changed in that single moment. Because while he was waiting to see how people would react, he was running through how people normally react in school. He was waiting to hear if anyone would laugh. He was waiting to hear if everyone would laugh. He was waiting to hear if taunts were shouted at him, or if people just sat there in silence and were a little put off by it. But none of that happened. And he realized, wait a second, I'm not broken. The world around me is. This is how I should actually be received. And it was a profound night. And I was shocked coming out of that event that there was nothing that existed in popular entertainment, popular culture, that just simply humanized and normalized young people with dysfluency, given the impact of growing up as a young person with dysfluency. And to this day, 6 years later, it'll be 6 years later when the film comes out in March. Discovery Channel picked it up. It's coming out March 11th. But 6 years from the time I went to that first day gala, still nothing else exists that does what I set out to do with this film. And it's still shocking to me that people just don't take this seriously. So anyway, I'll pause there, but that's sort of the how I got involved with this. That night lit a fire in me that burns to this day.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for sharing, your experience with it. And I think you highlighted some of the problems in media of how communication disorders are portrayed, stuttering is portrayed, the reaction that is prevalent and that is often seen. And your film, I think a lot of the responses I received just through emails or texts in the last 24 hours from people watching it were just, wow, wow, wow. We didn't know, or we thought we knew, but this was taking this to another level. I would love to hear about your experience really directing this film. I think you've given us a great run up as far as how did you get in this? How did you connect with Say? And then, your experience actually directing it. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we were able to raise just a little bit of money. And one of the reasons it was hard to raise money to actually make this is because people don't take it seriously and they don't have awareness about the possible impact of something like this. But we were able to raise a little bit of money, started filming. We would raise more money, keep filming. So over the course of about 2 years, we filmed the entire piece and then edited for about a year and a half or 2 years. And for the last year and a half, almost 2 years, the film has been in film festivals. We did what we call an impact campaign where we do one-off screenings like this one. And we've done almost 225 screenings over the last 2 years leading up to the release on March 11th. But the experience of directing the film was really, some documentaries, if you're tracking a sports team through the end of their season and hoping that they win the championship, you have a finite period of time, you have a finite group of characters, you understand the dynamics of the coach and the players going in and how to cover that. But for this, it was a true just sort of journey of discovery, which is one of the reasons that it took 2 years is you don't know when the story is over or when you're going to kind of rein in the filming and really focus on the editing. So it was really a journey of discovery to kind of figure out what the story was, what part to focus on, what characters to focus on, and that was kind of a mix of both filming and editing. Was really how to tell this. After 2 years, you have 500 hours of footage, and you've been all over the country in homes and at camps and at events and in people's offices, and kind of having to go like this was a big challenge.
I can imagine. And that was actually a question that had come up. Was there a scene or some part of the documentary that didn't make the film that you would like to talk about or share with us?
Yeah, there's actually two. One of them is really interesting, just because I think some people may know the actor Austin Pendleton. He was the stuttering lawyer in My Cousin Vinny, and My Cousin Vinny plays on television every year. It remains a classic. It's hilarious. He was also really big on Broadway and and off Broadway and in commercials and big in '80s and '90s movies. And the role in My Cousin Vinny that he played was a lawyer who is an idiot and stutters. And the interview I did with Austin in New York didn't make the film. There just wasn't a lot of time for some of the big celebrities who stutter to be worked into the movie. But he talked a lot about the trap of using his stutter to get laughs in My Cousin Vinny. It became a memorable and iconic role, but he wondered at the time, and still reflects to this day, on whether he did more harm than good. And it was a really beautiful, really profound experience for me to hear just how difficult it was for him to make the decision in that role and others about how to utilize his stutter or whether to utilize it. So that I'm hoping to work into. We're doing a podcast series and a book that'll come out about 6 months after the film does. I'm hoping to work in some of those interviews like that for that material. And there's one other thing. I see a question in the Q&A. This relates to your question as well, Bridget.
Yeah.
Part of the brain is affected to cause stuttering. And one of the things that I left out of the film intentionally is the science of stuttering and the science of speech language pathology. Because over the course of filming, I realized there are all these things that an audience may want to know, like the science of stuttering and the science of speech language pathology, but that don't really matter from the point of view of how an audience member treats a young person who stutters. The mission of the film is to go outside of stuttering, outside of the SLP community, and grab generic, regular audience members who don't have a relationship to stuttering, and to say, here's something you must be aware of. Here's something you must have empathy about. You currently may not have empathy about. And it is the journey of a young person who stutters. If you're curious about the science of stuttering, if you're curious about what it would be like to be in a speech language pathology therapy program, or what it would be like to be a person who stutters, and that, look it up, talk to people, go for it, that's fine. But the most important thing, if you are a 9-year-old who stutters, the most important thing, you just want people to listen. You just want people to be kind and treat you like everyone else. So the science of it, and the science of speech language pathology, doesn't really matter from that point of view. What matters is you, audience member, and society at large, must do a better job of having empathy. And I think from my point of view, especially in the editing of trying to go like this with the story, it was, how do we just show people, characters, emotion, so that no one who watches this can walk away with any question about how they should approach young people who stutter. So that's one of the reasons that, and Allison, thank you for the question. I don't mean to dodge it, but I just wanted to give some explanation about why that stuff is not in the film, and also why I'm not really qualified to talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Ryan. I think that was excellent. Thank you so much. And Allison, I'm happy for everyone on the call, happy to send some resources here towards the end of our discussion, so that if you are interested in learning more about the science behind stuttering, that we'll make sure we get you pointed in the right direction and get that information to you. Ryan, a question that was sent that had come over that I think connects back to the adult you had mentioned who had portrayed a stuttering lawyer in My Cousin Vinny, and then was coming back and kind of rethinking that. Do you think that the coverage of prominent adults in the media, some of who were featured in the film as having overcome their stuttering, perpetuates the stigma of interacting with people who continue to stutter?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Isabella. I love that question, because even before I started making this film, I always had this weird feeling of like, is this really interesting or cool or good? When I would see the annual viral video about whoever America's Got Talent or The Voice was featuring, because every year there is a new person who stutters, who goes on the show, sings beautifully, makes it to the next round or the next round or whatever, and that viral video gets passed around, and the entire celebration, the entire point of that video is, look what happens when this person sings, they don't stutter, that's the victory. And that to me is so incredibly toxic to the lives and the journeys of young people who stutter. And I didn't realize it until I started making this film, about what that implants in the minds of the general population, that the real victory is fluency. And it's, it's okay to be happy for the young person who is going and singing and doing well. That I get that, that's cool. But the fact that what we are the exclusive thing we are celebrating when we watch that and share it is that they aren't stuttering when they sing. Because when they stutter, the implication is when they stutter, they're broken. And that is so, so, so toxic. That's why I love this question. The other problem, to go very specifically to the word that I think it's Isabella used,
Yeah.
overcome. And I'm probably preaching to the choir for a lot of folks on this webinar, but that language also that journalists are using over and over and over again in talking about Biden, for instance, that language is also incredibly problematic. I don't even think Biden would use the term overcome my stutter, because the journey is so complex, and the mission of a young person who stutters to become fluent, or to simply have some techniques to make speaking a little easier, or to not pursue fluency at all, it's this incredible spectrum.
Mhm.
And to suggest and to use the word overcome suggests again that the only victory is fluency. And as a civilian, so to speak, 6 years ago before I started making this film, I'd be like, oh, that's cool. He overcame it. That's great. Good for him. Cool, cool. And so I get it. But we just can't keep doing that. That has to change. Because what happens is, in a moment of totally understandable, totally kind celebration for Biden, or for the young person who is singing beautifully,
Mhm.
what we are actually doing is we are chipping away at the possibility that the world is going to stop insisting that fluency is the only victory.
And Ryan, I would absolutely agree with all points there. I would also add in that the term overcome sometimes implies effort, that if a person works harder, they can overcome this. And I can tell you, I've never met harder working people in my life than people who stutter, and the amount of effort that just goes into their day. And the children in the video mentioned that multiple times. I think there was one child in particular who mentioned at the end of the day, she was just exhausted, right? And I think that message of overcome is one that you guys are all here, and this is something we can leave here with, is that knowing that that is not the message we want to take out there, and working together as a collective to reframe that. Ryan, a question that came in was in regard, you mentioned, you were a civilian kind of coming into this and learning. Was the film crew educated on how to interact with children who stutter? And how did you, kind of work with that?
Yeah. So after the gala and in preparation for filming, um, I generally worked with the same, anywhere from 3 to like 5 or 6 people, every time we went out to film. But the message to them and to anybody new that was coming on board is there's a couple really specific rules that we have to follow, and the biggest one being we don't interrupt, and we don't cut people off. And if you are engaging with someone, so some of this was made easy because I was I conducted 90-95% of the interviews, even sort of camera on the shoulder, quick grab, hey, where are you headed and why interviews. But for everybody, they got the same message, which is we don't interrupt, and follow my lead. And everybody was really great about that.
Awesome. A question had come in too, that you focus on Melanie, a teenager who did not return. And it brings the reality that everyone is in a position in a particular point in time to be helped, even by a powerful context such as the camp. Did she have anything to say about why she stayed connected to the movie?
Melanie and Mark were really understanding about, and excited. I guess is excited is probably the wrong word. Down to participate in the film because they were so frustrated by their experience. And my decision to utilize Mark, especially in the film, was to show. So I think there's a lot of talk in the film about bullying, and the negative impacts of bullying, whether it's from a peer group, a parent, a teacher, whoever. Um, and it's clear and obvious how negative impacts come from bullying. But my interest in utilizing Mark in the film was to show, from my point of view, that negative impacts can come even from parents who would give anything for their child. Mark is a loving, caring, kind father who would run through a brick wall for his children. But when it comes to stuttering and the pursuit of fluency as the only possible victory, I believe, and I told Mark this, that there are negative impacts that, what you are seeing in this parent group, when we show the parent group in there, is the full spectrum. There's the parents on one end who never cared about fluency. There's the parent like Mark and his wife who believe fluency is the only victory. And then there's parents at various stages of discovery. But Mark is in the film because he represents this sort of other end of the spectrum from Say, and it's revelatory that led to a negative experience at a camp where 130 other kids are having a life altering experience because they come in open to the idea that stuttering could be okay. And Melanie wasn't given that chance. So even before utilizing Mark and Melanie and the family in the film, they obviously saw the sequences, and I even went and did some additional filming with them at Melanie's university. And they have their position. They believe in their approach, and we're more than willing to sort of put that in the film.
Thank you. And one thing that was noted was there any intention behind focusing on the stories of females who stutter, since more often you see boys who stutter, or simply a coincidence?
Just simply a coincidence. Yeah, it's when you have, whether it's a documentary about stuttering or king crab fishermen in the Arctic or whatever, like you need characters, and you need characters that can tell a story, or that provide insights. So over the course of filming, the 2 years of filming, getting to know people over time, the characters that ended up featured in the film were the ones that could articulate different journeys, and in different ways. So for instance, I love to come back to Sarah as an example. I don't care what you're making a film about. If you have someone like Sarah who is funny and smart and can tell stories, you want to put them on camera, and Sarah's an amazing character. So that's really what's there. But I think one important thing, just from my point of view, is that the characters that are in there represent a tremendous spectrum. The main characters that are featured there, tremendous spectrum of age, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geography in the country. And so I don't necessarily think there's a difference between, like, I don't think Juliana's gender matters, to
Mhm.
be honest. I think the story that she's telling is really, really resonant with any young person who stutters. It's a story of, in parts, am I worthy of love and relationships? And in other parts, am I worthy of being listened to by a teacher? I have great ideas. I have talent. Why is my teacher being so cruel to me? Or why are kids coming up to me in the hall and telling me I'll never have a boyfriend or a partner? So there's a
Mhm.
universality also to the stories that I think is important.
Oh, absolutely. And we had someone ask, what was your biggest takeaway from directing the film? And I know, I mean, you've shared so much already. Can you pinpoint something that really was, I think, your big moment for you?
Yeah, I mean, just I think I mentioned this a little bit at the start, but just how ignorant I was, and how I thought I was an empathetic person. I thought I was a kind person. But through the course of making this film, I realized that even passively, I had been complicit in making life hard for people who stutter, because I was unaware of what that journey was. And because if I was in college, for instance, and somebody tripped on their words, we'd be like, "What? What? Today, Junior?" And we thought we were funny. We thought that was okay, and it hurts my heart to think about it. That's part of making up for that, just in the fabric of the universe. I know I can't go back and, like, if I did that to someone with a dysfluency, or someone with a dysfluency heard that, I know I can't go back and change what took place. But trying to right that wrong it remains a big motivator for me.
Absolutely. And when you were filming, this documentary focused on Say, which is a camp. But did you learn of any other programs or anything else during kind of the course of your time?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. The question was, while you were filming, did you learn of any other programs like SAY that speech therapists can refer people to, or that you interacted with in your course while you were putting this together over the couple years that you were doing it?
Um, I when you do a project like this and it reaches a certain level of awareness in the community, you meet a lot of people and a lot of organizations. There's not anything in particular that comes to mind. I think if there's a sort of a desire to get to know the stuttering community, we put the five sort of biggest organizations in that closing card at the end of the film. But my focus remains on Say, because I think what they're doing is really truly revolutionary, and I think they're the only ones doing it um, the way that they do.
And I would chime in, there are a number of stuttering support organizations for children. We're able to send those out after our segment today. So if you're interested in looking at those or viewing those will be coming to you after, after we're done here today.
And Bridget, I was
Yes.
just typing a quick thank you
Oh,
to Robert's question. It moved
yes.
itself into the answered category. I didn't
Okay.
mean to move it anywhere.
Oh, I found it.
Correct.
Yes. And yes. And thank you very much, Robert, for your comment there. We have a comment from Callie Wolf, who was sharing the perspective of her son. When I was younger, I hated the fact that I always felt vulnerable because of my speech. And as I grew up, I sort of learned that vulnerability puts people at ease. It lends a certain comfort level to the conversation. Continued, it's almost been a filter to me to find people with hearts of gold. Shallow people don't get it, so they filter away. And then Kelly also generously shared something from a blog post. My stutter is honest, brutally honest. This was by Caporal. Every day it reminds me that I am imperfect. And that seems to go along with echoes some of the stories out of the documentary, Ryan. Tying
Yeah,
it.
thank you for that comment. There were some young people. I never had it articulated cleanly enough, I think, to include in the film. But a lot of the young people that participated would say one of the upsides of their stutter is it matured them earlier than a lot of their peers, because it let them realize, it forced them to realize that there are very few people in this world that you want to connect to and spend your time with. I didn't have a great version of that to include in the film, but it just, her brother's quote about it reminds me of what a lot of young people echoed as well.
And there was a question here. Will there be a follow-up story among the participants or any? We would love to hear about your future plans for this to show encouragement and just how, how people moved on.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'm there's a ton of stuff that I wanted to include, including and especially a lot of material with people who are very successful who also stutter. So Mark Vetri, as someone I'm planning to interview for the book and the podcast series that we'll have started working on now. There's just a lot of material that was too tangential to the central story to make it into the film, but that will go into the book and the podcast series.
Wonderful. Well, I know we're all looking forward to that. So I'm so glad to hear that you're expanding upon the platform that you already have in place, and we'll be able to share a little bit more. This is just wonderful. And Ryan, we have a question here from Rebecca. What other kinds of steps do you think are needed to promote the kind of acceptance of stuttering you want to see and that this movie promotes?
That's a great question. I don't. So just to focus on the movie for a second,
Yeah.
I one of the things that has kept the fire burning and kept this thing going, and one of the reasons it reached discovery is, and I touched on this a little bit, if the only people that see this film are young people who stutter, their parents, and SLPs, that's good, because it will make people feel less alone. It will show parents that there is happiness for their children ahead, regardless of whether they ever become fluent or more fluent. And that's something that parents worry about, is if I don't push my child to become fluent, if I don't push them through therapy, am I failing them? Have I failed them by giving them this stutter somehow? So if the film reaches those groups, that's great. But I don't think, to your question, Rebecca, I don't think the world around young people who stutter changes until or unless a film like this reaches many, many, many people outside of stuttering and outside of speech language pathology. So I believe that the math is very, very simple. Awareness equals empathy. There's a tremendous lack of awareness. However, it's impossible for a civilian, for the average person to watch this documentary and then make fun of people with disfluency. It can't happen. There is no rational human being who could experience this film, my film, or another one like it, or a piece of popular entertainment, right? Let's say there's a narrative 90-minute film or a TV show that has a main character who stutters, but the stutter isn't made fun of, it's normalized. Like you can't experience that as a society and then continue to make fun of people who stutter. So I think awareness equals empathy, and my job, and I would hope the role of people who see the film and like it, is to simply pass it on to another person or another 10 people or another 100 people. Because if we do that, if enough people see it, that will generate empathy, just by virtue of no longer being ignorant about what it means to be a kid who stutters.
And you mentioned this is going live on Discovery. Is it Discovery Plus, Ryan?
Yeah, so Discovery Plus on March 11th
Okay.
is the launch date in the US.
Well, congratulations. I think that's an amazing accomplishment. Tell us about the journey of, you're making a film, you're in film festivals, we're hosting screenings, and now going up to this level at Discovery Plus. How did it get there? And was that kind of your vision to begin with?
Um, well, so the dream was that we would go to top tier film festivals, and somebody would pay a bunch of money and then put it on, Netflix, and it would be like the thing that everybody who opens Netflix on this date, they're like blasted with the film, and we win all these awards and blah blah blah. And like we had sort of a smaller version of that where we went to 10 or 12 film festivals, won awards at almost half of them, and that was great. And like it looks great on the poster and looks great on the website. But then to come back to this lack of awareness and lack of empathy thing, when we went to distributors, and we went to every distributor you can think of, everyone under the sun, with our sales agent for the film, and we said, look, we have a film, it won all these awards, it's doing great, people are loving and watching, it could change the world for kids who stutter. Nobody understood that this was a problem that needed attention. The way we treat young people who stutter, nobody got it. And I say this with love and compassion in my heart. Don't take it the wrong way. If this had been a film about autism, there is so much awareness, and for the better, about what it means to be a young person with autism, to be on the spectrum, or to be a parent of a young person with autism, that I think distributors would have been more empathetic because they just have more awareness. But stuttering is not thought of, the psychosocial journey of young people who stutter, there's just not that awareness. So it took a while. But
Mhm.
finally, when it got in the hands of Discovery, they know their audience is intellectually curious. They know their audience comes there to learn new things. So they were able to say, well, look, this type of education will be considered a new thing for our audience. They will say, wait a second, there's something that none of us know that we should. And that I think is very exciting to Discovery, very exciting to their audience. So we're very, very grateful. And I think, if you fast forward 5 years, I think more places, I think more distributors, because it's just people. It's just people that work at these distribution companies. I think they will have much more awareness about the journey of young people who stutter 5 years down the road, in part because of this film, in part because of Biden, in part because I think society is starting to talk about it more, but there just wasn't the awareness. So we're really, really grateful that Discovery sort of got it, and that they are a home for things that weren't previously thought of as important or worth thinking about and studying and challenging yourself with.
I'm absolutely thrilled. I think you mentioned the audience intellectually curious and wanting to understand the lived experience, right? And I think that your film so captured that it helped so many people understand the lived experience. And speech language pathology, we always talk about stuttering. Well, we don't always, but we sometimes talk about stuttering as being an iceberg. And that analogy that sometimes what you're seeing, there's so much more underneath. And I think your film really captured that. A question that came in related along the lines of Discovery Plus and moving this platform forward to a far reach. Why do you think actors like Paul Rudd and Mariska Hargitay were interested in the project? And do you think that this will start a change in the frequency with which how stuttering is portrayed in Hollywood? So having those kind of actors attached to the project.
I certainly hope so. I know that they're participating and supporting the documentary just simply because they believe in the mission of it. Um, Paul Rudd and has been a spokesperson for Say for I think maybe over a decade at this point. He met Taro 10, 12 years ago and really hit it off. And when he saw the movie, put his name on it right away and was just really supportive. Same thing with Mariska Hargitay and Peter Herman, a husband and wife, who are supporting it. And George Springer, the Major League Baseball World Series MVP from 2017, is an executive producer for the same reason. He grew up as a person who stutters, continues to stutter, and wants the world to change for young people who stutter. So again, my hope is that the film does well enough and it's on a big enough platform and has a groundswell of support from folks who are seeing it now, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that it does force people who make content of any kind to utilize the voices of people who stutter more. Think about how many times, I mean, you can't even count them on one hand because the answer is zero. How many times have you seen in popular entertainment a person who stutters who is not in there to be a punchline? It's unheard of, and that has to change. It's a simple act of representation. And to your question, I really do hope that it changes.
And Ryan, this is a comment and a question. Such a compliment. It was such a wonderful film to watch. And as if you echoed and the story echoed, as a society where it can be unkind and critical of any group that doesn't fit the expected norm, do you have any plans to create a film like My Beautiful Stutter for other groups with perceived differences or communication differences?
Um, my focus for the next year is really on promoting the heck out of this and getting um, the book and the podcast off the ground. And to be honest, my company, my partner and I, we do a ton of work in the rare disease space where we make, you know, mini documentaries, podcasts, a bunch of other things for people with rare diseases. That people with rare diseases make up 30% of the population ballpark. And, even if there's 1,000 people who may have a specific disorder or disease, their voices are unheard. So we kind of do this every day in a smaller way than this film. And if the right project comes along, absolutely. Yeah. But at the moment, our whole focus is on elevating this film.
Wonderful. And I would love to hear, from the audience, any comments about if you had a particular scene or moment that was really your moment for you while you were watching, and you're welcome to type that in. And while we're listening to that, Ryan, or while I'm looking for that, Ryan, you mentioned you've got the book coming out, a podcast. So this project has grown and expanded in ways outside of the documentary. And it sounds like with so much of the film, so much of what you've gathered, that there's even more to do with it, right? And to continue to process and move forward. Um, so with those future projects, where can we find you, or how can we stay in touch with this story as we move forward?
Thank you. Yeah. So the film is on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/beautiful stutter. On Instagram, it's at my beautiful stutter. On Twitter, it's at love your stutter. You can follow along on any of those outlets, but the easiest, sort of quickest thing to do would be to sign up for our mailing list. So if you go to mybeautifulstutter.com, if you go to the website and use the contact form, you can just drop in your information, and that puts you on a mailing list that myself or my assistant Mel, either she or I, reply to everything and put out new updates anytime there's a new way to connect with the film or an exciting award or whatever. So I would sign up for the mailing list. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a favorite moment coming in from Cole Johnston, a tiny moment, just watching the young woman grab the microphone to speak at the camp and then start to cry. That was just so touching. And also another comment that the portions of the camp where you could go up and talk with the kids and their the buddies, and how they interacted to each other, and seeing those connections and that acceptance was awesome. And I would completely agree. I think one of my personal favorite moments was the buddies, and seeing how they were able to joke and truly be kids. And I think something that made me laugh was the push-up scene, like, oh, if someone walks by, say 99, 100. And I think it just hit home that these are kids, and they want to be kids, and they're at summer camp. I mean, I saw horseback riding, canoe. I mean, that camp was just absolutely amazing. Ryan, did you have a particular favorite moment, or a moment for you in filming?
No, especially when you're filming for 2 years and editing for 2 years, these folks play a pretty big role in your life. They all kind of become, I want to say kids, but not really. They all become like cousins that you really love to see when you get to see, So just watching everybody's journey. A question I get a lot though is, why did I include the basketball game? And I'd love to talk about that if it's okay for a second,
Yeah,
because
no, I would love to hear about that. That was a section of the film that stood out. So tell us, I would love that. Please do.
yeah, and I put it in there, like, I want that question. I want people to be like, what is this in the middle of it? We're supposed to be talking about feelings. Why are we watching this? And
Yes.
like, to me, it's very important, because the genius, from my point of view, of Taro holding this basketball game every year and the kids looking forward to it, is stuttering does not discriminate. Kids come from all over the country, from every walk of life, right? And sports in general is a great equalizer. It's a great place for people from all backgrounds to come together. Literally, you don't have to speak the same language, but if you put a soccer ball in front of two people that love soccer, they're going to bond and have something, right? And so I think it's brilliant that amidst all the talking about feelings and the talking about pain, there is also just a generic, regular summer camp activity that is like the highlight of camp for these kids, where they get to play against the counselors and sometimes they win. Putting that in the middle of it is so normalizing and humanizing for the kids who go through it, that it felt very, very important to include in the film. Because my whole point is, these are kids who stutter. They're not stutterers. They're not a subsection of the population. They are us and we are them. And if you go to a 2-week summer camp, it's going to have a great set of sports activities. There's going to be other stuff. There's going to be swimming, horseback riding, art. But a big basketball game is a summer camp staple, whether you're going to camp to be around kids who stutter, or you're going to camp because it's an art camp. Like, I went to art camps and we would play huge basketball games, and we'd play against the counselors, or we would do, all kinds of like activities where it's kickball. We played kickball against the counselors, and it was a big deal. And like, it's so normal. And I think the other thing I wanted to do on a smaller level is, I think if you are 10, 12, 14, and just by the societal pressure on you, or the societal impact on you, you turn your nose up at people with dysfluency, or you think they are other or different. If you watch this film and you see they can ball, they can play, and they're having the time of their lives, a little bit of jealousy might get you to rethink your position, and that's not the biggest reason to include it. But I could see myself at 13 thinking I was cooler than kids who stutter, because I was like every other 13-year-old. I lacked empathy. And then seeing this and being like, damn, that looks fun. God, that looks fun. And those kids can play, and that matters. That really does matter, when you are trying to change a toxic perception, or you're trying to change negative attitudes. So that's one of the reasons that's in there. I would say it's my favorite part, to go back to the original question, but it just felt important to talk about.
No, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think hearing your perspective about how summer camp basketball game and that competition between two sides, the counselors and the campers, is an integral part of a camp, not just for stuttering, but for summer and for camp, and to see them be kids and have fun, and also extremely talented basketball players on both sides was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. I think the other side of that coin would be, is there any part of the film that maybe in hindsight you wish you would have either maybe shortened or lengthened to either showcase more, or that, just in the end, now that, you're moving along into the book and podcast, that you wish had more time to it?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure this is when everybody on this webinar, when you work on a project and then send it out the door, the
Yeah.
first thing you see are all the things you wish you'd done differently, and that never goes away. And also with a producer who is really experienced, and an edit, my editor won an Emmy for an ESPN 30 for 30 he did, of Miracles in Men, about the Russian hockey team and the US hockey team back in the 80s. Like, there's some really talented, smart people who worked on this. Every one of us would have cut it differently. So we all kind of know all the things we'd want to see done differently. And just, I've put that away, because now it's like, here, it's out in the world. Like, it's got to go.
What's done is done, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. There's some specific questions that I will get to here at the end. This is a great question. Were there relationships that you observed that you found particularly powerful, but were unable to capture?
Were there relationships that were powerful that I didn't capture?
Mm-hmm. Or maybe that
Uh,
weren't featured. As you mentioned, you couldn't feature necessarily every child at camp, but
no, not really. I mean, I no, I think if it rose to the level of needing to be in the film, it's in there.
yeah, absolutely. So some positive comments and just favorite moments. The girl who sang so beautifully was something that stood out. The humanity of it, which I think you've mentioned many times as one of your kind of foundational points of the film, to show the humanity and to show the lived experience. Um, and we have a number of questions, Ryan, that I'd like, as we're kind of closing out here, our last 10 minutes, that people would like us to review how they can connect back with you. So if you wouldn't mind just revisiting that, how we can connect back to this, how we can see it on Discovery, I think that would be wonderful. And I will also make sure that's included in our post chat correspondence as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So on Facebook, it's at facebook.com/Beautiful Stutter. On Instagram, it's at My Beautiful Stutter. And on Twitter, it's at Love Your Stutter. Um, Myself and my assistant Mel, she and I always reply to everything and manage those accounts. And then the best way by far is to sign up for our email list at mybeautifulstutter.com. And there's a ton of stuff on the website to look through that's super cool. Um, so I would visit the website and sign up for our mailing list, and we'll reach out when there's exciting news.
Wonderful. And was there a title of the book yet? That was a question as well.
I think both the book and the podcast series are going to be titled My Beautiful Stutter. I think we're just going to try to, because my whole thinking is people absorb content in whatever media they prefer. So if there are
Mm.
people who aren't going to see the doc but love listening to long form podcasts, I want to reach them. Or people who would prefer to just read a book about it, I want to reach them. So I think it's all going to be My Beautiful Stutter.
Wonderful. Okay, great. That captured a number of our questions. And there were some
Could I?
questions that were very specific to what stuttering is or singing. Those will also be sent out via our post chat conversation. So we are, as we're watching the comments and questions come through, we are sort of gathering the themes and making sure that we will address those. But since we have Ryan with us right now, I'd like to just spend our last few minutes with direct questions that are directed specifically to him, his project, his future projects, and we've got quite a few here. Ryan, I know you're scrolling through as well. Let's see. Any parting thoughts from the crowd? We'll go ahead and kind of do a last call on questions, and then we'll roll up.
I'd actually like to reply to Amber's comment, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. Maybe
Um,
missed that one.
Amber, to the comment about Malcolm's storyline, and as an African American male who stutters, he will often be subjected to dual discrimination. It was inspiring to see his progress. I just wanted to also mention Malcolm, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, the film was honored to be the Inspire screening at the Napa Valley Film Festival. And you go a few days before the festival and you do 3 screenings for middle and high school kids from Northern California. We ended up screening for about 1,500 middle and high school kids and doing a Q&A. And because it was this honor, they flew in Malcolm and Cindy, his mom, and Sarah and her parents, and they did Q&As. And just to your point about how much he's grown or had grown in the film, he is now like 6'2", starting varsity baseball, 4.0, just absolutely crushing it. And at these Q&As, he was an absolute rock star. There was one Q&A that lasted almost 2 hours, and they followed us out to the parking lot asking Malcolm about his life, his journey, and truly the transformation at Say was a 180-degree turn in how he saw himself. And it's just really, really powerful to see. So just wanted to mention, like, what you saw has continued to this day.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, it looks like the remainder are comments. So on this note, I will like to, thank everybody for coming today and for engaging with us this afternoon. And Ryan, thank you for being here and taking time out to go above and beyond in sharing your experience as the director of My Beautiful Stutter. And it's such a beautiful compliment to the experience that we've all had within the last 24 hours of watching the movie. And I think that your mission to bring light to the lived experience of stuttering, to bring light to the need of empathy and kindness, and to rewrite the media narrative of what stuttering is and how people should be treated is just absolutely amazing. And I think that there's so many of us that are here today that got so much out of it. For those of you with some open questions, we will be following up, providing some information on, we'll say Stuttering 101, what it is, what that information is. We will get that to you. We will also make sure that we include the links and information for Ryan's current projects and future projects. And as he mentioned, the listserv, which would be going to mybeautifulstutter.com, is really the best way to stay up to date with what's going on with this project and all of the works that you're doing outside of that. And we've got so many comments here. Thank you so much for working on the film. And Ryan, any parting thoughts for us as as we finish our webinar today?
I just want to say thank you all. I know there's a million things you could be watching or spending your time on, and that you took the time to not only watch the film, but to join the webinar and ask questions and leave comments. It just means a tremendous amount. It's been a 6-year journey for me. It's a labor of love and something I really believe in. So to find kindred spirits just means a lot. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. So thank you for everyone who attended today, and to our wonderful team at the College of Arts and Sciences for helping us host this event. We hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and we will be in touch soon with future events and speakers discussing stuttering.